Hello and welcome back. All right, so if you're ready to start editing your images, let's go ahead and open up an image into ACR. If you don't have a raw file, that's fine. Go ahead and right click on an image in Adobe Bridge and select Open in Camera Raw. Doesn't really matter what kind of photo, just have something open in ACR so we can start working on learning about the interface, and then after that we'll go ahead and start editing some images. So first let's go ahead and take a look at all the tools that we have available up here in the top left of the ACR interface. Now these tools work exactly the same in Photoshop, plus you can use the same keyboard shortcuts that we've used and learned about in previous lessons. If you're on a different tool and want to select the Zoom tool, you can do that with the letter Z. And then if you want to navigate around an image, you can either select the hand tool from here, use the keyboard shortcut, which is the letter H, or use the space bar to navigate around the image. Next, we have the white balance tool, and this will allow you to quickly and accurately set the white balance for your image as long as you click in the right spot. And we went over this in a previous lesson, but we'll go over it again in an upcoming lesson in a little bit more detail. Then right next to that, we have a color sampler tool, and this will allow you to click on your image to get a sample of the RGB values for that area that you clicked on. So you would use this tool as a means to color correct your image to make sure you're on the right path. Let's go ahead and clear that out. Right next to that, we have a targeted adjustment tool. And if you click on the tool, you will see additional options here as well. And by choosing one of these, you can target specific colors and make adjustments to them via the hue, saturation, luminance, or via grayscale. For example, if I want to change the color of the sky, I just select hue, and then I pick an area that I want to change, click on it, and then I can change the range of colors that I clicked on. And we can see over here in our panel here to the right, the purples and the magentas are being changed for the hue. And if I want to change the saturation, I can come up here and select saturation and then change the saturation for those colors as well. So it's a great way to target specific colors of your image versus trying to guess what colors you need to adjust over here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and undo that with Command or Control and the letter Z. And it will only allow me to go back in time one step. So instead what I can do is I can click on Default to reset everything back to 0. Now if you need to crop your image, you can select the crop tool from here or use the keyboard shortcut, which is the letter C. And you also have other options inside of the tool as well. If you need to select a specific aspect ratio, you can do that from here, or you can custom create one for yourself. If you want to constrain to the image aspect ratio that is set for it right now, you're going to select this option. And you can also show or hide an overlay as you apply the crop tool. So if I apply the crop tool, we can see there's a grid overlay with 9 grids, and this is great for applying a crop based on a compositional rule known as rule of thirds. Another great tool for fixing your images is this alignment tool right here. It's a straightening tool, and if your horizon is crooked, you can fix that with one click of this particular button right here, and it will straighten out your horizon. Or you can click and drag out a line like this that will then align your image based on how you draw that out. So right now it's crooked, whereas before it was correct. But if your image is crooked, you can either do it automatically or you can click and drag out a line to ensure that your image is straight. Now this next tool is a transform tool, and it will also help you straighten out your images, but it's more used for images with architecture in them. And if you find that your images have a skewed perspective because maybe the buildings are leaning left or right, which is usually caused with a normal type of lens trying to capture not only your main subject, but maybe buildings in the background, and those buildings can be either warped or skewed to the right or left, and it makes it look like the buildings are leaning. Well, with this transform tool, you can use it to adjust the vertical or the horizontal lines of that image to straighten out the buildings or other elements in your image that are not aligned properly. You can also adjust the aspect of the image. You can rotate it. You can scale the image either larger or smaller. You can offset the image as well. And all of these will help you align your image so that it's properly straight vertically and horizontally. You just have to be careful with this tool, because if you have people in your image along with those buildings that you're trying to fix, then sometimes it can distort the people within that image and it's going to look unnatural. In that case, you're going to have to do more advanced type of editing directly in Photoshop versus doing it in ACR. We also have some options up here that will allow ACR to make those adjustments automatically. And I find a lot of times this works straight out of the box, if you will, just by pressing this button. But if not, then I can make minor tweaks and adjustments to the different sliders here in order to fine-tune the perspective adjustment that I'm trying to fix. And I just want to mention real quick that we're going over these different tools and settings real quick. It's just a basic overview of all the tools available. And in upcoming lessons, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about some of these tools, and I will show you how to apply them to your images so you can see exactly how they work. Now, another one of my favorite tools in ACR is the spot removal tool, which is located right here, and the keyboard shortcut is the letter B. Now, in Photoshop itself, we don't have a spot removal tool. Instead, we would use our healing brushes in order to remove spots or make other types of adjustments like that to, let's say, remove blemishes or remove objects from our image. But in ACR, we can use this specific tool not only to remove dust spots, there's actually a little one right here, but we can actually remove items from it as well. Just takes a little practice in order to get used to using this particular tool. And you also have options to select from a healing brush, a clone brush, adjusting the size, the feather, and the opacity of the tool as well. And I'm going to show you how to use this on a particular image that came with this course in an upcoming lesson. Okay, so after that we have another tool here. It's called the red eye removal tool, and it will allow you to, well, remove red eye from your images, which is usually caused from on-camera flash. Next, we have local adjustment brushes. And again, this will allow you to make adjustments to your image in specific locations. So if we take a look at the editing panels that we have here, all of these edits right here and these sliders are global adjustments. So in other words, it's going to affect your entire image, whereas your local adjustment brushes are going to target specific areas of your image that you apply your brush to. So I just applied a brush here, and then I can increase the exposure of just that area where I applied the brush. So you can do some custom edits directly in ACR versus having to go directly into Photoshop. So what you'll do then is you'll edit your images directly in ACR, but you also have tools to do retouching, like your spot removal tool, and then local adjustments with your brushes. And you can do all of this before bringing it into Photoshop. And sometimes you may find you'll never have to bring that image into Photoshop because you have a lot of creative, custom, powerful tools directly in ACR that will allow you to do a lot of your editing directly in this software versus going into Photoshop and having to create layers and doing this and that. A lot of the editing you can do just makes it quicker and easier to do in ACR versus Photoshop. So it all depends on your workflow and what you're trying to achieve. And I love doing the majority of my work in ACR because all this information is being saved in that original raw file versus me having to create a separate PSD file in order to keep all the layers intact. So it just makes the data management of all those files much easier as well versus having the original raw file and a PSD file. All right, I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And we also have another tool right here and the one next to it. These are graduated filters. So you can use a linear filter to apply edits to your image, or a radial filter as well to apply edits in specific locations. So these are two more tools that will allow you to apply edits in specific locations of your choice. And we're going to use these tools as well in an upcoming lesson. Now, if you find you need to make an adjustment to preferences, instead of backing out and going into Adobe Bridge, you can access preferences from right here. You can also use these two tools here to rotate your images. All right, let's go ahead and check out the tools that we have available in our right panel. And at the very top, we have our histogram. And the histogram is going to display information about the image as we see it now. So it's going to show the information for the different RGB channels as you adjust your image with the different edits, and the histogram will change according to those edits that you apply. So if I increase the exposure, you can see that the histogram is starting to change. Now, I love using the histogram because it's helpful when editing our images by allowing you to see in graphic form what is actually happening to your image as you edit. And if you do increase or decrease the exposure too much, you can apply warning settings to allow you to see if you've gone too far and over edited the image. And you can do that by turning on these clipping masks right here. And then if I increase the exposure too much, it's going to show a red overlay showing that the information is being clipped, or the detail information is being lost because I over edited. And then if I lose detail in the shadows, it's going to show a blue mask, and that's going to tell me that I over edited the shadows. So this is a great way to see if your image is being over edited and you're losing detail either in the highlights or the shadows or both. So I would go ahead and turn these on to ensure that you're not over editing. Now, just below the histogram, we have some additional information that can help you when editing your image. First, we have RGB values, which is a form of a color sampler. And you'll also notice when you hover your mouse over the histogram, it's going to show you additional information in this section right here. So right now it's showing the exposure is set to 0, highlights is set to 0, whites, etc. So it's just an easy way to see what adjustments have been made and how it's been applied to the histogram when you hover over that area. And I find the histogram is a great way to decide where I need to start my editing. Because if I have a huge gap like I do right here, then that tells me I need to fix this part of the image first, which would be the white points or the highlights, or in this case, both. And then I can make those adjustments accordingly in order to fix the image based on the histogram. Now, the first editing panel is selected by default, which is this one right here. It's just the basics panel, and this allows you to make global adjustments for your white balance, the temperature, and the tint. You can adjust the exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and black points, as well as adjust the clarity, vibrance, and saturation. Again, these are global edits, and I would do all of these edits first before I do any other type of adjustments or local adjustment edits. Once you have that done, you can then move on to your tone curve and make adjustments to the tone curve either via these sliders here, or you can manipulate the tone curve directly on the graph here by selecting the Point tab. After that, you can then move on to the Detail section, which will allow you to sharpen your image and remove noise. Then we have HSL, which stands for Hue, Saturation, and Luminance. Hue will allow you to change the individual color channels. So if you want to change your purples to a different color, you can use this slider here. And then saturation will allow you to increase or decrease the saturation of a particular color channel. And then luminance will allow you to increase or decrease the brightness of those different color channels. So you can either make your adjustments here via the sliders, or you can use your target adjustment tool, which can be accessed with the letter T. After that, you have split toning, which will allow you to add different color casts within your image based on either the highlights or the shadows or both. And again, we're going to go over all of these different panels so you can learn how to use these types of edits on your images. After that, we have lens correction. Now, this is one of those types of edits that should be applied on all images, and here's the reason why. All lenses create some kind of lens distortion based on that particular type of lens, and then ACR, or Adobe, has created profiles based on those types of lenses and will automatically fix that distortion when you enable profile corrections. Now, it's not going to work on all images because if the image data is not saved to that file, then it's not going to know how to fix it. In that case, you're going to have to manually make those adjustments. So this information is captured, like the metadata of your lens and the type of camera used when you take the photo. So if you're shooting JPEG and you're not saving that metadata to the JPEG file, then you will have to manually do it. If you're shooting RAW files, then it should automatically apply that metadata for Adobe or ACR to make those changes. It's going to tell you the lens profile, the make and model of the camera, and then it's going to apply a specific profile to that particular image. Now, right now I have a JPEG file selected in ACR, and it's not giving me this information because that data is not in the metadata of this particular file. After that, we have effects. So you can adjust the haze of your image. If you have a lot of haze on your image, you can remove some of that, or you can add haze to create kind of a fog-like effect to your image. You can also add some additional grain, and you can also add a vignette to your image as well. Once you start to increase it, you will then have some other options for making your vignette. After that, we have camera calibration, and you want to make sure you have the correct process version set for your particular image. Version 4 has the most recent algorithmic profile that ACR uses to edit your images. If you're using an older version, then you're not going to have the same tools available to you as version 4. So if we go to version 1, we can see that the options here in the basic panel are different versus version 4. Now, you're going to come across this if you shoot with an older camera. Your camera may automatically select one of these older versions. My first camera, I think, was back in 2002, and it was a Fuji S2, and at that time, only version 1 was available. So any images that I edited at that time and I open in ACR now will automatically default to this older version. So if you have an older digital camera and you process that image, well, if you come back in and want to re-edit it, then I recommend selecting version 4. You can also select the camera profile if you shoot in RAW. If you shoot in JPEG, then you're not going to be able to make that adjustment, and then you're going to have to apply the different color calibrations for a particular image or images via the sliders here. After that, we have our presets, and anytime you create a preset, it will be saved here for easy access. And then snapshots is kind of like your history states. If you create snapshots as you're editing your images, you can go back in time to select a specific edit that was done at a specific time. And you're going to want to do that in case you start editing an image and you don't like it. Instead of starting over from scratch, you can go back to one of the previous snapshots that you created. All right, so if we click on this little icon right here, you will find additional options that you can use to work with in ACR. So we're going to go over some of these options in upcoming lessons. Down here, we can select views to look at before and after images, so you can get an idea of what the image looked like before you applied any edits. Down here, we have our zoom levels. If you want to increase by a certain zoom percentage, you can make that selection here. Then if you want to make some changes to the image itself, for example, the color space, just click on these little links down here, and then you can change the color space for that particular image, as well as the number of bits per channel, which we learned about in a previous lesson. We also have some other options here for resizing our image, and if you want, you can also apply sharpening for screen, glossy paper, or matte paper. It's not something I do, so I'm going to leave that unchecked. All right, so once you're done editing your image, and you've done everything you can with the tools available in ACR, and you decide you need to do some more creative type of edits, you can bring this file directly into Photoshop by clicking on Open Image. When you do, you don't lose this information. It's automatically saved to the original file. So if you come back at a later time, you can open up that image in ACR again, and all your editing settings will still be there. Then when you do bring that photo into Photoshop and create additional layers, you're going to have to save it as a PSD file in order to save those layers and all those edits that you did directly in Photoshop. So then you'll have two files, your original RAW file and the new PSD file. All right, so that's it for the quick overview on the ACR tools and interface. In the next lesson, we're going to explore the basic adjustments panel in ACR.